Welcome back to the channel of Truth, Trust, and Transparency. Today, I'm speaking about a slightly controversial topic or a slightly controversial thumbnail or title for this video, but is why inflation is actually a really good positive thing for property investors. Now, before you bite my head off in the comments section, let me quickly explain myself here. So if you're watching this and need to get your head around what inflation is essentially the increase in costs for services and goods over time, which decreases the purchasing power of your money. Now, inflation is typically measured via the CPI, Consumer Price Index, and is reported both on a monthly and quarterly basis. What many people don't realize is the monthly recordings of the CPI do not include all the data sets, and so many people make rash decisions, posts, all those kinds of things on those monthly CPI figures. However, the quarterly CPI is the real one you want to watch if you want to keep tabs on inflation. Now, as we all know, it is the goal of the Reserve Bank of Australia, the RBA, to keep the inflation target within 2 or 3%. When it goes less than that, obviously they want you spending. When it goes more, they want to reel that spending in. Now, despite the plethora of ideas that you can come up with in terms of the way in which the RBA and or the government could come up with ways to curb inflation, to bring down spending, the one main way that you and I both know is that reserve cash rate. Now, obviously, they set increase or decrease the cash rate. The banks need to put their profit on top of that. Those two things together then become our interest rate, which you and I pay our mortgages based on. A great example of inflation, if you are going to the shops and if you're, in the vicinity, if you're anywhere, 20 years of age or older, is that when you go to the corner store with $10 worth of money, what you can buy now versus what you could have bought as a kid in your early teens, 10, 15 years ago, a lot more with your money back then. Why? Well, the cost of goods is increasing over time, which means for $10 now, I can buy a lot less. Look at your typical coffee at your local cafe. I'm sure these things were, $1.80, $2, $3. Now they're $5 or $6. I mean, I even went to a cafe the other day, and I'm a smoothie and milkshake guy, and it was $14. And I thought, wow, that is a key example of inflation, prices increasing for the amount of money. So essentially, in principle, it means that us as humans, for the dollar that we have, there is going to be less. We're going to be able to buy less and less things with that dollar or that $100, Think of it. That $10 could have got me 2 milkshakes back in the day. Now it's not even getting me a full milkshake. In 10 years' time, it might not even get me 20% of a milkshake, and that is how you can think of inflation. Now, if you are not a property investor and you're just saving your money and you just think that saving your way to retirement or life is going to be your answer, inflation is working against you. Why? Because that $100 in today's value, inflation means that to buy that same $100 worth of goods, the next year it's going to be $103, and then it's going to be 3% above that, and on that, and forever increasing. And so the money that you save is going to be worth less goods or less whatever you want to buy the longer that time goes on. That's why, and it might be a not so popular phrase, but savers are actually losers. Now, let's not get this confused. You do need to save to invest, but you need to make sure the invest part comes in, because obviously if you're in savings mode, you're trying to invest into your first property or into your second or into your third or into your next purchase. That is a good example to beat inflation compared to if you're saving it and putting it away. Now, you're probably thinking, why would buying property be any better, or why as a property investor, I actually don't mind inflation in terms of the scheme of things? Why? Because it's going to wipe out, inflation will slowly wipe out people that just save their money, meaning you need to invest. Inflation for property investors is that it devalues debt. What do I mean by that? Perfect example. Let's just say you buy a $600,000 house today and you've got a $500,000 loan on that money. The cost of absolutely everything else over time, inflation goes up. However, where that includes the cost of goods, that includes salaries, all that kind of stuff. And through inflation, in 10, 15, 20 years, that $500,000 of debt might actually only feel like, $250,000 or $300,000 because of inflation and the today's money. Similar, if I go out, think about it this way. If I go out today and I buy, let's just say that $10 milkshake, I buy that milkshake, it's $10. Now, in 10 years' time, when I go to buy a milkshake, it's not going to be $10. It might be $14, $15, $20. And you're going to look back and say, holy shit, buying a milkshake 10 years ago for $10 was so cheap that now I can't believe how much money they are. And then if in today you think back and you think, they were buying houses for 180, 200 grand. That's what people paid at the time. But because of inflation, because of that inflation devaluing that debt, we don't see 100 or 200 grand as much money. Obviously at the time it probably felt like that. But because of inflation, that debt is now devalued. And I think for property investors, the great part about this is not only can we park that money in an asset, not only do we leverage our money into that asset. So, $500,000 house, it might cost you 100, it might cost you 80, 100 grand to get into. So not only do I leverage that amount of cash into a larger asset, but that larger asset is now growing in value. And my debt may stay the same, but I know that with inflation, with inflation, the cost of goods, the cost of services, salary is going to increase. So even if I keep that $500,000 property, even if I keep the debt at $400,000, I know that in 10, 20, 30 years' time, that is going to seem like an incredibly small amount of money compared to today. So I think it is a very great tool that if you are saving your money, if you can park it in property, we get the negative gearing benefits, we get the capital gains discount should we have to sell the property, and you do it after 12 months' time of holding it. I see it as an incredibly valuable tool to hedge against inflation, because at the end of the day, the property's gone up. I mean, you might say that everything's going to be, that milkshake might be $20, right, when in 10 years' time, but if you've invested in today's dollars in property, or you have previously, you own some property, or you're going to buy in the next 12, 18 months, in 24 months, in 10, 15, 20 years' time, when the cost of goods is through the roof, at least you have the leverage of that property. You have so many different things that you can do. You can get you can extract equity and use that. You can sell the property and use that money. You have those tools. If you're just saving your money, if you're just putting your savings away, it is likely that once we get into those 10, 20 years' time, you're not going to be able to afford, or you're going to struggle to be able to afford the cost of living in those years' time, because your debt or the money that you're holding is being devalued. So I hope that has given some clarity around why I think inflation is actually good for property investors. If you're a saver, in my opinion, and you're not doing anything with your money, you are going to end up losing. It's going to wipe you out eventually. The cost of everything is going to be astronomical, and you're not going to be able to afford it if you're just relying on your savings. However, if you're relying on an investment that's going up and up in value, you have so many more options, opportunities that is also paying you. I mean, don't forget the rents as well increase over time, increase with inflation too. So any rental income that you're getting from those properties, either before or after you've paid them off, is slowly increasing over time, as well as the value. And even if the debt is staying the same, then in 2030, 2040, 2050, 2060, when I'm looking back, I'm saying, that debt's only 400,000. I mean, the average salary by then, we know it's about, depending on the source too, it could be 90 or 100,000. We know by that time it could be 150, 200,000. So then my income, the income that I have compared to the debt is only 2x, whereas now it's 4x. And that's only going to get worse and worse and worse. But remember, the one thing that stays the same and that is locked in is that debt amount. I've purchased in today's dollars. I've locked in the price. I've locked in the debt amount. Even if I'm not paying it off over time, it is going to slowly devalue itself. That, my friends, is why I think that inflation is a good thing for property investors. If you agree, disagree, have thoughts, feelings, or emotions, let me know in the comments. If not, I'll see you guys as usual tomorrow.